Welcome back to Welsh Miniature Board Gamer, and today I'm going to have a go at building some terrain for my Frostgrave games. Now usually I build very generic terrain that'll fit in with any game I play, but I figure I've been playing Frostgrave now long enough that they're entitled to their own pieces of terrain, and so yeah, I've decided that I'm going to have a go at building some decent terrain for them. So for those of you who want to skip to the end and see what it looks like, well, at the end of this part, I've got to this stage. So if you like the look of this and you want to see how I did it, stick around and watch it to find out how I did it. Part 2 will be when I actually start putting the flock and stuff on it, but I wanted to document this up to this stage, just in case I completely ruin it when I start using the flock. So yes. So stick around and I'll show you how I made this piece of terrain. So to start with, we've got this bubbly polystyrene and an MDF base. So the MDF base, I cut the bevel and I rough up the shape of the polystyrene. Then I burn the polystyrene slightly to make it harder. Now do this outside with a respirator because it is highly toxic. That's the warning. So then I got this 3D printed stairs, which is the reason why I wanted to build this piece. And I get some filler with a mixture of PVA glue and some brown earthy colour paint. Now I'm going to wedge this into the gap which I've made to fit the stairs. So this is going to work for two reasons. I've done this, for two reasons. And that's for one, it's going to grab hold of the stairs and I'm not going to have to use any glue. And two, it's going to give me a nice hidden base coat. So if anything shows through in the end and I've missed anything, it's not going to be this horrible white polystyrene showing through in a gap or something. It's going to be a nice brown colour, which is going to blend in well. So I drag it all up over the stairs to make it look a bit more natural, like it came out of the rock, not that it was pushed into the rock, to make it look a little bit more natural, as in it was cut from the same piece of wood. So while applying my mixture of filler, glue, paint, I just dab it on really. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. That being said, don't use a brush because you'll end up with loads of little brush marks all over and it won't look right at all. It'll look streaky, and when it comes to dry brushing, you'll pick up every brush stroke. So yeah, just dab it on and it'll give you a naturalish looking rock face. It's not going to be perfect by any means, but it'll give you something interesting to look at. It'll also act as a hardener for this polystyrene, because if you know the white polystyrene, it is horrible. It is so flexible and breakable that you can't really use it without using some sort of coating. So this works as a hardener for the polystyrene as well. So if you didn't want to do the burning method outside, well ventilated with a respirator, you could always just try and do it this way, and this is the way I've always done it. It's just this time I tried to burn it to make the polystyrene a bit harder to begin with. So as you can see, I am running rather low on my filler at this point, so I'm trying to make it go a long way on very little. But you can do that. You can stretch it quite a bit. It's a forgiving piece of supply, really. So next I use cat litter. This is clean cat litter, and I just tip it around the edges of the model. It gives a look of some like tumbled rocks or some gathering debris, etc. Gives it a bit of interest and a bit of something for your dry brush to catch. Now I put it on top, and then I realised I didn't want it on top because I want to keep the top fairly flat for a very important reason, which I'll explain as I go on. Next, I use this very small grain ballast, which I just pour over the thing. I just put it on the stairs, I put it on the base. I put it everywhere. And I noticed I got this huge gap here, so I poured way too much PVA glue into this gap. And then just dump a load of rubble on top to try and fill the gap. And some onto the stairs to make it look like, you know, it's tumbled down with the weathering of this piece. So now we go on to brushing it. Now, when I brush it off, loads of these loose stones came off, so definitely do this, because if you don't and you go straight to painting, you're going to end up with pieces showing through, which you don't want when like these rocks fall off and what have you. So brush off all the loose stuff first, it'll save you loads of heartache. So with this colour, you can either use black or a very dark grey. This is a very dark emulsion, so a house paint. And I'm bombing this with everywhere. You could use a spray can because we've coated the polystyrene, so it's not going to eat into it at all. But it's cold here in Wales at the moment, so I'm going to use just a brush on emulsion paint, and I'm going to cover everything with this paint. So why I'm keeping the top of it flat is for storage, because I love making terrain, but I always find storage a real nightmare. So I'm going to make a few pieces of terrain all at the same height with a flat top like this, so that when I put it in a box, I can make a little shelf and put the shelf on top of these flat pieces of terrain, and hopefully save myself a bit of space and make a little bit of storage for myself, so that I'm not just having like random sized objects just thrown in there. They're all going to be roughly the same size, so I can put things on top of them and thus, you know, hopefully save myself some space. Because that's the only downside about making your own terrain, is you end up with a lot of terrain and you got nowhere to store them. So I'm hoping this will help. So I get a lighter acrylic, cheapy craft paint, and I'm dry brushing all over this model. I make sure I hit everything. It doesn't matter if this is neat or if it's a bit rough, a bit crude, whatever. It doesn't really matter, because we're going to be covering an awful lot of this with other paints and hopefully a nice flock finish. Although, as I said in the intro, I'm really dreading the flocking. Even though I've done flocking before and I've done it quite well, it's always the place where I feel like I'm gonna go wrong and ruin my model. So it's kind of why I'm showing you up to this point now, before I possibly ruin it with my snow flock. So yeah, there's a quick dry brush with this sort of light grey, I would call it, catching everything and making everything look like that. So then I go over to an even lighter grey, and this is another cheap craft acrylic, so I mix it in a little bit with the darker one, and I hit it again, just dry brushing over all that nice texture we put in it with the filler, catching all the details of 3D printing of the stairs. Now it's going to look a bit bright here, but as paint dries it goes darker, and it's not going to really matter because we're going to hit it with another colour in a bit and it'll bring it down slightly. But really, don't worry about it too much. Just do it, cover it, dry brush it, get the details showing, get it all nice like this. So I'll run off and go and get my next colour. So it's like a fawn brown, and I mix it in with the grey. Now when I dry brush this, you're going to hardly see a difference, but it is there, and in person it breaks up that stark grey and black look, and it makes it look, well, maybe not natural, because my terrain isn't perfect, it doesn't look real, but it's nice, you know, it works for the game. But it does break up that stark black and white, grey and white look. It gives it an extra colour, but it's very muted. So next I go to this sort of dirt brown colour, which I'm going to be using, and I'm going to be using this, well, as dirt. Even though I'm going to be flocking, I'm going to be covering it all, just in case the flock comes off and I'm left with something underneath. I want it to look okay, not like there's a big chunk of something missing and you just got a base coat underneath. I think that looks terrible. So I'm picking my way around the rubble where I can and the interesting looking pieces, just so that it gives it some contrast from the brown to the grey, just so it looks nice. So then I go and work my way up onto the top, where I figure some grass might have started growing and mud and all is going to be up here. So I'm going to put this down. Just working all over. Again, leaving some spaces where it looks grey, so it looks like something will be showing through, where the thin earth has just washed away off the top. And I put some on the stairs, so it looks like the mud has run down onto the stairs. So yeah, I just pick out some odd places here, making sure that I cover anywhere where I'm going to put any flocking or light brown earth. So here I'm doing the fawn dry brush again, just to pick out all the nice textures on the top and around the base, just so that if anything comes off, it's got brown underneath and not anything, too plain. So at this point I'm thinking this is looking really decent and I would use this in most of my games. But I want to turn this into a Frostgrave piece, so I'm going to be doing some snow flocking, which could end with a Welshman in tears. I often go wrong when it comes to the flocking, so hopefully, fingers crossed now, that this is going to work out well. And we'll see in part 2. So if you want to come and see if I ruin this piece or not, come back for part 2. But until next time, wishing you the very best from Welsh Miniature Board Gamer. Goodbye.